Alright folks, you'll see by the date that the 6th of October has been and gone a few days ago. So that's the time of the year where I started my unitisation of the portfolio. So each year I kind of do my yearly assessment, which is what I've done here. So as you can see, it's put in pink because it's a special day on the unitisation. So we can see here that over the full year, I've made 14.11% on my portfolio. And the same thing happened as last year. Life Strategy 100 has come and beat me by making 16.14%. Compared to Life Strategy 80 and 60, I've beaten those two. So I guess it's not a fair comparison really, because what I've said before, and I still do say it kind of, is that my real competitors are the Life Strategy 80 and the Life Strategy 60, probably somewhere halfway between. Probably closer to 80 to be fair. So that's my real competitor, because that's the kind of conventional wisdom. You have like 20 to 30% bonds maybe, the rest is stocks, and you just rebalance back to that. So when you're withdrawing from the portfolio, so that's kind of my competitor. But if we really look at it a bit more fairly, I should really be comparing to Life Strategy 100 because I barely have any bonds in my portfolio. So if you really think about it, if you really want to compare a 100% equity portfolio, it should be this number here that I'm comparing to, 16. So in those terms, I've done badly. So it depends on your perspective as to whether it was a successful year or not. Really? So there we go. Yeah, so what I've also done is, what I've done every year is I've broken down the performance. I mean, to be honest, this is a bit difficult to track because obviously throughout the year I've sold out a load of stuff. I've bought new stuff. I was gonna kind of look at the performance of the stuff I've sold, but to be honest, I just got lazy and I couldn't be bothered. So all I've got here is just the stuff I still own and the yearly performance. So obviously I've just put VWRP in because the other one will be very similar. The ACWI will be very similar to that. But obviously I didn't own it for this whole period, so it's kind of irrelevant. But as we can see there, VWRP, which I've also put lower down here as one of my comparators, did even better than Life Strategy 100, which to be honest, it tends to have done over the past 10 years because Life Strategy 100 overweights the UK. So that's kind of a reason not to use that one really. But yeah, and what I've also put in here is VAGs on its own, VWRP on its own, and then just that 75-25 portfolio. If you go back in time, I did a comparison video of just having a world tracker and a global aggregate bond fund, which you rebalance back to 75-25. So that, I guess, is another realistic comparator we could do for the portfolio, which I've won. Okay. I'm going to talk from both sides of my mouth here. I said realistic, but actually it's not realistic because I'm 100% stocks. So I should really be comparing to this. But yeah, here's all the comparators anyway, so yeah. And if we look at the performance of each thing, obviously that's done pretty well. Lowland has done really well, 26.52%, and I did hold that for the whole period. But it's kind of shocking that Merchants, which has a almost identical remit to Lowland, has done shockingly badly compared. So it's swings and roundabouts, isn't it? You have good performers and bad performance. I mean, it's had a pretty decent. I mean, Lowlands is better, but then it kind of makes up for this year, doesn't it? In 2022, where Merchants has done a lot better. So it comes and goes. F&C again. I don't think I owned that for the whole period, did I? Well, you can tell I didn't because there's no number there. But yeah, F&C 17.62. But obviously, I'm only up 10%. So obviously, I didn't get all of that. Yeah, another bad year for BlackRock smaller companies. Oh, having said that, I say another. The year before was pretty good, but obviously it was only recovering from 2 bad years. Yeah, all of the smaller companies not so great. The small cap 600 tracker's doing better than my the active fund there, as you can see. But again, the year before it was the other way around. It did a lot better. Yeah, Aberdeen Asia Focus. I haven't mentioned that for a while, but yeah, that has just creeped up and up and up. 30% up this year, and as we can see, it's actually my first double bagger. It was as high as 118%, obviously because this is the 10th, not the 6th, so that's why all these numbers have changed, because obviously we had we had a scare in the market, didn't we? Everything went down by almost 2% there. So yeah, but it was about up 118% at its high. So yeah, that's done really well. How did it do the year before, actually? Yeah, a pretty decent year. Not didn't shoot the lights out, but a pretty decent year the year before. And all before that, it was struggling. Yeah, another smaller company. Yeah, and Murray International, another one that's had great years. In fact, if you look at those years, that is probably the best performer in terms of like consistency. Obviously, it had a bad year here. All the other years, 2020, almost 20, 18, 22. JGGI had a bad year actually, but I didn't hold it for hardly any of that, I don't think. Yeah, and then another bad year, really bad. It's been a really poor year, a poor 5 years really for Scottish American. I think it suffers from the same things as Fundsmith, to be honest. I feel like Fundsmith, if they were forced to have a income fund, it would look like Scottish American. And Fundsmith is also doing badly. You know, it's quality companies that aren't particularly like into the AI stuff. They've got Microsoft at the top there, but apart from that, there's not really AI stuff in there. So yeah, you never know. Having stuff like this, gives me some comfort because I feel like if the whole market, like it did on Friday, a little bit, a tiny bit really, 2%'s nothing. Having stuff like that kind of gives me comfort for if like the top 10 companies in the world do really badly, that there's some different stuff in there because it's not done so great for a while. It's got Microsoft, like I said, but as you can see, it went up slightly on Friday when everything else went down, up 0.35. That's not going to happen every time, but I don't know. It feels comforting to have stuff like that isn't winning, if you like, in quotes. I listened to Charlie Sheen on Conan. That's why that phrase is in my mind. Winning. And then Scottish Mortgage, another great year, 2 years in a row now. But it's the same old story though. You've got to put it in perspective. It's in perspective of those 2 years before, and it's still, if you look at the period from before its big boom and bust to after it, it's still not got a great performance. So it's got some making up to do. I think you have to go to max now because it was 5 years ago. Yeah, so you have to go to max. So if you go from there to there, and you compare that to a world tracker, I can guarantee the world tracker's winning from those 2 dates. So it's like before the big peak and drop. Let's do it. I'd have to do it separately. But if you do 5 years, it's got some weird thing going on. See, 5 years gets you right into the peak of the boom before the bust. So it's not really a fair comparison. You have to go a little bit before it so that the peak, and I don't know what's going on here in the graph. December the 20th, 95%. There we go. 85 for the oil world. Okay, so that's good. So that means that after the big boom and bust here that SMT's had, we finally now, after a bit of a recovery after the bust, we're finally at a stage now that if you compare it before the big boom over COVID to now, we're actually beating the all world tracker, which is great news. It's taken a while to get there, 5 years, but we're finally at a stage now where they can say to themselves, we ain't doing atrociously badly anymore because of that bust we had after COVID. Because often people forget, they think about the bust, but they forget that there was a boom before the bust. So it's not like you've only really lost out really badly if you bought in these stages. So, and I did some buying and I did some selling as well. So I've kind of done okay in it, to be fair. But yeah, that's good. So yeah, I was under the impression it hadn't recovered enough, but it looks like it has compared to VWRP. Yeah, Impact's not a great year. That's still doing pretty badly. GSK, pretty decent year, 15%, slightly higher than my overall performance. Yeah, Pfizer's doing badly. Yeah, and Barclays, and just Barclays in NatWest, another amazing year for those two. But again, I've suffered really badly even before I started measuring it. So before this year, I've done really badly because even though we've had these mega years, we've had almost double for both of them. Down year, bit of a recovery, 50% up, 60% up. This year was amazing for both of them. But even after all of these big numbers that are in this table here, I'm actually only up 33 and 36%. Because this like table of the performance masks the fact that I owned it for quite a few years before where it did really badly. So yeah, it's very much a recovery story because I'm only 33% up, 36%, and Legal and General's up 14.5%. But obviously, I only bought that recently, so I'm flat. I think, yeah, down a couple of percent. Yeah, UPS has done terribly, and actually, I think I've got most of that because that's down 31.92, and I'm down 27% of it. So yeah, that was a terrible investment so far. There's the rest of the numbers, not much to say really. I think I've got all of the Next Energy Solars doing terribly, down 12%. Ghost Street Energies are having a bit of a comeback recently. I'm up 5.85% on it. I was close to, because remember I actually owned Grid and GSF, and I put it all into GSF after GSF went down by quite a bit. And as you can see, we're actually now better than before. So since the switch, Gresham House has gone down 10% and Ghost Street Energy's gone up 3.45%. So I'm pretty close to putting half of it back into Grid. At some point I might pull the trigger on that, but I'm not sure. Don't know. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully that'll probably happen at some point. And then Trig's done really badly, but I don't think I got most of that reduction because I only bought it this year. Yeah, I'm actually up 1.57% and I got the dividend. So again, this number isn't what I've got, but that's how it performed over the whole year. I guess a lot of this fall in the share price is what attracted to me in the first place. So yeah, I haven't got that. And SDCL is up 2.83%. But again, I obviously got in at a better time because I'm up 22.49% on that one. So I've done better than the full year. So yeah, I keep losing out to LS100 past couple of years. But I don't know, I do feel better though. Because even though I don't have much bonds in my portfolio, I feel like just by having the value stocks is kind of a diversification, which bonds doesn't really give you. I don't know, it's hard to say really. I feel good though. So let's have a look how my income has been doing for the year. So I've totted it all up. Again, if anyone watched it from the previous year, you'll know that it's rather convoluted. The way I've got it, it's just kind of evolved gradually over the years, and it's all a bit of a mess to be honest. But if we just look at the raw numbers, this is probably the simplest way of looking at the income. The raw numbers we've got here that it went from 12,251 to 13,152, 7.35% higher than last year. And we can see here because towards the end of the year I kind of rebalanced from some higher yielders to some lower yielders. We're actually so far projecting a 0.92% reduction in the income. But obviously all of these numbers will gradually get higher as they have dividend increases. But yeah, that's how it's looking for the year ahead. But obviously that 13,152 that we got last year, some of it was created by this capital going into the portfolio here. 220 quid went in on that date, 2,800 went in on that date, and 4 grand went in towards the end there. So yeah, some of it is unnatural rises in dividend income. That's just buying new stuff, which has then generated income. So we look at, this is why I calculate some other measures of the income growth. So the first one is income per unit of the unitisation. So we can see there that actually my income only grew naturally by about 4%. So a lot of that increase was these inflows into the portfolio, which then went into really high yielders. So yeah, this is probably a more accurate measurement of the dividend income. But to be honest, again, this is where it gets silly. This is a bit inaccurate because what happened was last year, you'll see that number's pretty big from last year, 5.72%, but it's only 5.05% here. And it's really stupid. This income here includes interest that got paid within the SIP, the ISA and the LISA. And the year before, there was stages, you can see here, it's probably these months here, where there was actually a lot of money in the Trading 212 ISA. And because the Trading 212 ISA has a pretty good interest rate, there was a lot of interest getting paid, which then got included in these numbers here. So, you know, it's all it's silly. What I should do is I should just rethink the whole thing, but that's difficult to do because then once you've rethought it and doing it an accurate way, you then have to go back to all the previous years and detangle it all, and it's really difficult. But who knows, at some point I might try and rethink it and put in some better measurements here. But it is a bit hard to kind of decipher what's going on with the way I've measured it in all these different ways. But as you can see, so if we just go by those numbers, the actual portfolio income went up by 5.27%, because again, the portfolio income the year before was really high because of all that interest I got. So that's why that number's lower than this number here, 7.35%. It's all silly. It really is silly. And then if we add here, what I've got here is just everything. I mean, this column here is just what I could spend without reducing my cash balance. It's the income from the portfolio, it's the £1,000 LISA bonus, it's the 720 quid SIP bonus, and it's the interest that I got paid outside of the portfolio. Oh yeah, because another thing that gets stripped out here is the SIP and LISA costs. So the AJ Bell fees that get taken out of that account are taken out of the income because that doesn't leave the account, if you like. It gets sucked up. But yeah, these numbers don't include the costs of running the SIP and the LISA, whereas these numbers do. That's another reason why that number's lower. Yeah, but if we look at that number, so here we've got 15,710, and that's almost a 5% increase on the year before. And I tracked my spending to 3rd of November, so this is just it's a pretty accurate estimate, but it's just an estimate of my last month of spending has just been estimated, and the total for the year is going to be about 11,340. So yeah, 4,370 is the difference between the income, in quotes, because some of it was just bonuses from accounts, and the actual amount I spent. And yeah, and there's the portfolio value at the end of the year, 431,000. Doing pretty well compared to the previous years. And then if we compare it to how RPI was over the most recent months, so that's from September to August, because that's the most recent data we have. I think I've beaten it on all fronts, haven't I? Because the highest one there is RPI, 3.84%. And the lowest measure of my income growth was 4.02%. So yeah, the worst measure versus the worst measure for RPI, I've beaten it this year. But yeah, so it's a slow recovery back. So this is comparing RPI from before all of the escalated inflation we've had because of COVID to after. It measures it from the year where I purposefully reduced my income. I just decided to go for some growthier stuff, and that's why my income per unit here went down by 14%. But then, because that was kind of a cognizant choice to reduce it, that's the year I've decided to compare everything to. And it you know, it's before the really high inflation years, so it's kind of fair. It goes before to after. And if we can compare the compound annual growth rate of inflation, which is what it's doing there, and we can see that obviously this is the measure of the year before, and because this year's is lower than the average of the year before, it's kind of gone down gradually. So this is what's happening. You know, these numbers, these inflation CAGRs from before to after are gradually going down, and hopefully my growth rate from those same years in my income, based on these different measures, those numbers are gradually getting higher. So as we can see here, because we had a really high year last year, it's a bit lower this year for that one, and that's why the number's gone down slightly. And for this year, it's kind of stayed the same, 5.28%. And for this year, it's gone down slightly. But because that year, that's going gradually lower as we get on top of inflation figures, these two are converging. So we're at 4.43% versus 6.35%. So, you know, inflation's beating my income growth per unit. But if we look at my overall income, 5.28%, we're getting a lot closer with the comparison, 6.35 versus 5.25. And then, you know, if we include the interest and the LISA bonuses, I'm actually beating the CAGR of inflation. And then obviously, you know, if we look at other measures of inflation, I'm doing a lot better. Yeah, that's everything I think on the year-to-year annual review, I guess we'll call it. So I guess I'll see you next time. Bye bye.